The unbreakable warning. The sky above the ruined colony was painted in deep red, like a wound cut across the stars. Captain Daniel Cross stood still, his boots sinking slightly into the black, cracked soil. The air smelled of burned metal and death. In his gloved hand, he held a holo message disc. The glowing blue letters hovered above it, flickering with static. "You touched my daughters. Now, there's no escape." Cross's jaw tightened. His heart pounded like a war drum, the weight of those words pressing against his chest. He had spoken them 3 days ago. Now, the enemy knew what that promise meant. 3 weeks earlier, Daniel Cross had been an ordinary father, if an ex-military bounty hunter could ever be considered ordinary. His twin daughters, Mia and Leela, had just turned 8. Their laughter had filled their small home, a sound that made even the cold metal walls of their station feel warm. Cross had left the life of war behind after Earth signed the Galactic Peace Accord. He wanted peace for his family, but peace, he realized too late, was a lie. The Galactic Enforcement Corps, GEC, claimed to protect the galaxy with strict laws. In reality, they ruled with fear, and humans, being newcomers to the interstellar community, were treated as lesser beings. When Cross refused to pay a bribe during a routine inspection, GEC officers marked his family as high risk. 2 days later, his daughters vanished. Cross had searched every shadow of the galaxy since then. He hunted criminals, informants, and traitors to get answers. And now, standing on this dead colony world, he finally had his answer. Orion Station. His daughters were there. But Orion was no ordinary prison. It was the galaxy's secret lab for psychic experiments on children. Mia and Leela had always been special. They could sometimes predict things before they happened. It was a harmless gift, just small guesses during games. Cross never knew that the GEC had been tracking children like them. Now, the enemy would pay for their mistake. The communicator on his wrist crackled. The voice was sharp and fast. "Cross, you there?" It was Nix, his informant, a rogue guy, once a government defense system, now his only ally. "I'm here," Cross answered. His voice was low, like a predator stalking prey. "Bad news," Nix said. "The GEC knows you're coming. They've activated Orion Station's defense grid. No one's ever breached it before." Cross stared at the distant horizon where his ship, the Iron Vow, waited in stealth mode. "First time for everything," he said. "Yeah, sure," Nix replied. "But it gets worse. They've dispatched hunter drones, fast, smart, and already on your trail." Cross's eyes narrowed. "How long?" "Less than 10 minutes." The bounty hunter turned toward his ship. His mind shifted into combat mode. Cold, sharp, unyielding. "Nix, power up the engines and prep the rail cannons." "Understood. But Cross, if they catch you, you'll never see your daughters again." "They won't catch me," he said. His voice held steel. "No one stops me when it comes to my girls." Cross sprinted toward the Iron Vow, his boots kicking up ash. The ground trembled beneath his feet as distant thrusters roared from the sky. The hunter drones had arrived. The ship's ramp opened automatically as he approached. Cross leaped inside and slapped the control panel. The ramp sealed with a hiss. The cockpit lit up, holographic displays swirling around him. He dropped into the pilot's chair and gripped the controls. "Engines online," Nix reported. "Hunter drones incoming. 5 ships, closing fast." Cross's fingers danced across the controls. The ship roared to life, thrusters firing as it lifted into the air. Through the front viewport, he saw the drones, sleek, metallic predators with glowing red eyes. "Deploy chaff," he ordered. Small pods fired from the ship, releasing clouds of electromagnetic interference. The drones hesitated for half a second. Cross took his chance. Full power to forward thrusters. Prepare the gravity cannon. The ship surged forward, slamming Cross into his seat. The drones recovered and gave chase. Missiles streaked after him, but the chaff confused their targeting systems. The asteroid field ahead shimmered like a jagged, deadly maze. "You're heading straight into that mess?" Nyx asked, panic in her usually calm voice. "No better cover," Cross said. "Arm gravity cannon. Charge to max. That close to the field. We'll rip ourselves apart." Cross's eyes locked on the screen. "Do it." The iron vows screamed through the asteroid field. The drones followed with relentless precision. Cross guided the ship between massive rocks, spinning in chaotic patterns. One drone miscalculated and was crushed by a drifting asteroid. "Gravity cannon charged," Nyx reported. "The silent hunt begins." The space around the iron vows seemed calm, but Captain Daniel Cross knew better. Calm in space was often a lie, a mask for hidden danger. The massive dreadnought on his scanner proved it. The ship, marked GEC Revenant, was a fortress in orbit. Its hull gleamed black, a predator waiting to strike. Cross sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the blinking red dot that represented his enemy. His daughters were somewhere beyond that ship, imprisoned in Orion Station. He had to get through. "Nyx," he said softly. The AI's voice crackled to life. "Yeah." "Status." "The dreadnought's launching patrol fighters. Scanning grid just went live. They're sweeping for cloaked ships like ours. We can't stay here." Cross's fingers tapped the armrest. The cloaking field used energy that emitted faint gravitational ripples. The GEC was now scanning for that. They were learning. What about Orion Station itself? Station shields at full. Docking bays locked. Main weapons charge. Standard procedure when they expect an attack, Nyx replied. A pause. "But there's something else. I intercepted a command transmission." Cross leaned forward. "Play it." Static filled the speakers, then a cold voice cut through. "The bounty hunter is here. Target, Daniel Cross. Kill on sight. The children must remain alive for mindfire. No mistakes." Cross's jaw tightened. The voice belonged to Commander Rail. Cross recognized the tone from an old war broadcast. Rail had led human purges during the Perimeter Rebellion. "They know I'm here," Cross said. "They know you're here," Nyx repeated. "But not where." "Yet," Cross added. Cross stood and walked to a small storage compartment. He opened it, revealing a battered leather jacket. He slid it on, the weight familiar. From the shelf below, he took out an old Earth-made pistol. It was a kinetic weapon, primitive compared to plasma rifles, but it left no energy trail. He checked the magazine. 12 armor-piercing rounds. "Bringing that old thing?" Nyx asked. "Trusty tools for dirty jobs," Cross muttered. He holstered the pistol. "We're going down." Suggestions. Nyx projected a holographic map of Orion Station's orbit. "There's an abandoned mining outpost on Orion's moon. We can land there. The GEC won't expect a ground infiltration." Cross nodded. "Do it." The ship glided silently toward the cratered moon. Cross kept his eyes on the scanners. The dreadnought didn't move. The patrol fighters drifted through the darkness, searching for him like mechanical wolves. One passed within 5 kilometers. Cross held his breath. The iron vow's cloaking field flickered but held. Nyx whispered, fighter turning away. "We're clear." Cross exhaled as the ship dipped into the moon's shadow. Minutes later, the landing struts touched down on rough, frozen rock. Cross stood and strapped a combat knife to his thigh. Then he grabbed his helmet and locked it into place. The visor activated, displaying environmental data. Oxygen minimal. Radiation normal. Surface temperature, -80 degrees. "Nyx, keep the ship hidden. If I don't check in within 2 hours..." "I know," the AI interrupted. "Burn the station to the ground." Cross smiled grimly. "Exactly." The airlock opened with a hiss, and Cross stepped into the frozen wasteland. The ground crunched beneath his boots. Above him, Orion Station loomed like a metal vulture circling its prey. Cross moved across the moon's surface with slow, measured steps. The low gravity made every movement feel strange. but his military training kicked in. He approached the mining outpost, a dome-shaped structure covered in frost and half buried in dust. The airlock was sealed with rusted clamps. He knelt beside the control panel and brushed away the ice. The old Earth tech was familiar. He rewired the circuits manually. With a groan, the door unlocked and slid open. Inside, stale air and darkness greeted him. His visor switched to night vision. The room was empty except for broken crates and old mining tools. Cross stepped in and sealed the door. He followed the corridor to a rusted comms terminal and plugged in a portable decryptor. "Nix, I'm in. Connect me to Orion Station's maintenance network." "Working." "Wait, got it," Nix said after a few seconds. "I'm tapping into their security grid." Cross scanned the station layout as it appeared on his visor. Orion Station was massive, with over 50 levels. The children's holding cells were in Lab Sector 7, deep in the core, but reaching them meant passing through 2 heavily guarded checkpoints. Then he saw it, an auxiliary maintenance shaft that bypassed the checkpoints. The path was narrow and ran through the station's thermal conduit system. Risky, but possible. "That's our way in," Cross said. "Yeah, about that," Nix added. "The shaft is temperature regulated by plasma vents. If one activates while you're inside, I cook." "Exactly." Cross set his jaw. "We'll time it perfectly." As Cross prepared to leave, his wrist comm vibrated with a new signal. A transmission, faint but clear. A voice crackled through. "Daddy." Cross froze. His heart skipped. "Mia." "Daddy. They said you're coming. Please, hurry." Cross's eyes burned. "I'm coming, sweetheart. Stay strong. I promise." The signal cut abruptly. "Nix," Cross barked. "I'm tracking it." The signal came from Lab Sector 7. "It's real." Cross clenched his fists. His daughters were alive. But now the enemy knew he was listening. "Time to move," he said. Cross left the mining station and sprinted toward Orion Station's surface access port. He reached the metal entrance hatch and placed a small explosive charge. The device beeped softly. He stepped back. "Nix, jam local sensors." "Done." Cross triggered the detonator. The blast was sharp but controlled. The metal hatch blew inward. Cross climbed through the opening and entered the shaft. The walls hummed with heat. His visor showed the plasma vent cycle. Every 90 seconds, the pipes would release superheated gas. He crawled forward. Sweat dripped down his back, despite the freezing suit temperature. The shaft trembled as the first plasma vent fired behind him, scorching the metal. "Move faster," Nix urged. Cross pushed forward, muscles straining. Another vent fired ahead of him. He paused, counted the seconds, then surged forward. His skin prickled from the heat. Finally, he reached the maintenance access hatch. He kicked it open and dropped into a dimly lit corridor. The walls vibrated with the deep hum of Orion Station's core systems. Cross drew his pistol and pressed against the wall. "Nix, guide me to Lab Sector 7. Take the next left." Cross turned the corner and came face to face with a guard. The alien officer's eyes widened. Cross fired. The kinetic round punched through the guard's helmet. The body collapsed. Alarms blared across the station. "They know I'm here," Cross thought. He sprinted toward Lab Sector 7. "Nix, lock the doors behind me." "Done," she said. "But Cross, you just triggered a full security alert. Commander Rail is watching you now." Cross didn't slow down. He whispered to himself, "Good. Let him watch." Breaking into the Iron Fortress. The cold, metallic corridors of Orion Station hummed with energy as the alarm echoed like a pulse of fear through the walls. Red lights flashed overhead, casting shadows that twisted with each flicker. Captain Daniel Cross moved through the chaos, his pistol steady, his breath slow. The weight of his mission pressed down on him, but the image of his daughters kept him going. Mia's voice echoed in his mind. "Daddy, please, hurry." He wouldn't fail them. Not again. "Nix," Cross whispered into his comm. "Give me an update." The AI's voice crackled softly in his ear. "You've got 3 squads of GEC enforcers heading toward Lab Sector 7. Reinforcements are mobilizing from the barracks 2 levels above. They're not playing around." Cross pressed against a wall and peeked around the corner. A patrol of 4 guards was sweeping the hall ahead, their black armor reflecting the crimson glow of the alarm lights. "Weapon types?" Cross asked. "Plasma carbines. Standard issue. Their armor has kinetic plating. Your pistol can punch through if you aim for the seams." Cross's eyes narrowed. He counted their steps, timing the pattern. His grip tightened on the pistol. The old Earth-made weapon might look outdated, but its rounds hit with brutal efficiency. The lead guard paused, turning his head slightly. Cross fired. The bullet struck the guard's neck joint with a sharp crack. The alien's body dropped. The other guards turned too slowly. Cross pivoted, firing twice more. The second shot pierced a guard's visor. The third hit another in the chest. The last soldier raised his carbine. Cross lunged forward and slammed his knife into the alien's throat. The guard gurgled, then fell silent. "Clear," Cross muttered. "Nicely done," Nix said. "But they're rerouting security droids to your position. We need to move. Fast." Cross knelt beside one of the guards and tore off a wrist communicator. He clipped it to his belt. "See if you can access their comms with this," he said. "Already trying," Nix responded. "Give me 30 seconds." Cross reloaded his pistol and moved forward. The station trembled beneath his feet, a distant vibration like a heartbeat. He recognized it. Shield fluctuations. Orion Station was cycling its defenses, maybe preparing for external attack. "They're scared," he thought. "Good." He reached an intersection and paused. Lab Sector 7 lay straight ahead, but heavy blast doors blocked the corridor. Cross crouched beside the control panel. "Nix, can you open this door?" "Working on it." They've layered encryption protocols. It'll take time." Cross's mind raced. The longer he stood here, the greater the risk. He looked at the ventilation shaft above him. Alternative routes. That shaft leads to the lab's observation deck, but the system is wired with thermal sensors. If we trip them... "We don't trip them," Cross interrupted. "Bypass the sensors. I'll climb through." "You're really going old school today," Nix said with a hint of amusement. Cross holstered his pistol and jumped, catching the edge of the shaft opening. He pulled himself inside and began crawling forward. The metal walls squeezed his shoulders. Sweat dripped down his neck. "Nix, guide me." "Go 20 meters, then turn left," she said. "The observation deck overlooks the cells." Cross moved carefully, his body tense with anticipation. As he reached the turn, voices filtered through the vents. "Specimen transfer complete." Commander Rail ordered full sedation of the human twins. Cross's breath caught. "Nix, did you hear that?" "Loud and clear. They're moving Nia and Leela." Cross's muscles coiled with rage. "Where?" "Unknown. Let me dig deeper." He pushed forward until he reached the observation deck grate. Peering through, he saw a large room below. Rows of transparent holding cells lined the walls. Inside each one was a child. Some human, some alien, all with wide, fearful eyes. Their heads were fitted with neural bands, metal devices that pulsed faintly. Cross's heart twisted. In the middle of the room stood Commander Rail. The alien's thin, pale frame was wrapped in a dark command cloak. His sharp, predatory eyes studied the cells with cold interest. 2 GEC officers stood beside him. "Nix, record everything," Cross whispered. "Recording." Rail's voice carried through the observation deck's speakers. "The human twins have strong neural potential," Rail said, gesturing toward an empty cell. "Project Mindfire requires both. Take them to the core lab." The officer beside him hesitated. "Sir, the father, Daniel Cross, is here. If he finds them..." "He won't," Rail snapped. He may be dangerous, but he's just a man. We are the law. We will break him like all the others. Cross gritted his teeth. Rail turned and walked toward the far door. 2 guards followed. Nix, Cross whispered. Open the vent quietly. Done. The vent cover released with a soft click. Cross pushed it aside and dropped down. He landed with a low thud. The children gasped and pressed against the back of their cells. He approached the nearest one. A small alien boy with wide silver eyes stared up at him. I'm here to help, Cross said softly. He knelt by the control panel. Next. Complex, but crackable. Give me a minute. Cross scanned the children. Most were no older than Mia and Leela. Some were human. All looked terrified. The alien boy spoke softly. The bad man is taking the twins, he said. Cross's heart raced. You saw them. The boy nodded. They were here. The bad man said they were special. His lip trembled. He hurt them. Cross forced his rage down. Where did they go? The boy pointed toward the east door. Core lab. Next, Cross asked. Almost done. The holding cells clicked open simultaneously. The children stepped out hesitantly. Follow me, Cross ordered. Stay low. Stay quiet. He led them toward the east door. It opened into a narrow hallway. Cross scouted ahead, his pistol raised. Nix, can we get to the core lab from here? Yes, but wait. Oh no. What? They've activated lockdown protocols. And Cross, I'm detecting plasma charges along the corridor. Cross's stomach dropped. They're going to blow this section. Yes. 5 minutes until detonation. Cross turned to the children. Their eyes were filled with terror. His daughters were still ahead. He had to choose. Save these kids or push forward alone. The alien boy tugged his sleeve. We can help, the child whispered. Cross blinked. What? The boy pointed to a nearby maintenance panel. I can feel it. The wires. I can tell them to stop. Cross realized what he meant. This child had neural abilities, like Mia and Leela. Nix. Possible. He might override the charges. Cross knelt. Okay, kid. Do your best. The boy placed his small hands on the panel. His eyes glowed faintly. The plasma charges countdown halted at 30 seconds. You're amazing, Cross said, gripping the boy's shoulder. Now let's go. The group moved toward the core lab. Cross's mind raced. Rail was ahead of him. His daughters were close. The enemy thought they knew his limits. They were wrong. He whispered to himself, You touched my daughters. Now there's no escape. Race against time. The narrow corridor stretched ahead like a metal throat, cold and claustrophobic. Captain Daniel Cross led the group of frightened children forward, his pistol raised, every nerve on high alert. The faint hum of Orion Station's life support systems thrummed through the walls. Behind him, the alien boy, Soren, walked with wide, glowing eyes, still dazed from using his psychic abilities to stop the explosive charges. Nix, Cross whispered. What's the status on the core lab? Bad news, the AI responded. Commander Rail increased security. Automated turrets are online, and bioscanners have been activated. If they detect human DNA, yours or the twins, they'll trigger nerve gas. Cross cursed under his breath. His daughters were in that lab. The GEC didn't want to experiment anymore. They wanted results. Project Mindfire wasn't a research program. It was a weapon test. Is there a manual override? Yes. Security control room on the next level. But it's guarded. Cross's eyes hardened. Then we clear it. The children followed him down a side passage, sticking close to the walls. Their small footsteps echoed faintly. The younger one sniffled, eyes darting toward every shadow. Cross knelt beside Soren. I need your help again, he said softly. The boy blinked up at him. What do you want me to do? Can you sense guards nearby? Soren closed his eyes. His brow furrowed. 2, no 3. In the next room. They're nervous. Good, Cross said, squeezing the boy's shoulder. Stay here. Protect the others. The boy nodded. Cross moved to the door and placed his ear against the metal. Faint voices drifted through. Rail said the humans close. He took down Gamma Squad like they were rookies. Yeah, well, this one's ex-Pathfinder Corps. Should have killed his daughters when we had the chance. Cross's vision darkened with fury. He adjusted his grip on his pistol. Nix, open the door on my mark. Ready. Cross steadied himself. Mark. The door slid open with a hiss. The guard spun around too late. Cross shot the first one through the forehead, then pivoted and dropped the second with a bullet through the throat. The third tried to raise his plasma carbine. Cross fired twice. The guard collapsed, gasping. Cross stepped over the bodies, heart cold. The station's defenses were designed for fear and control, not determined fathers. Nix accessed the security panel. On it, the terminal flickered as Nix worked through the encrypted layers. Got it. Deactivating turrets, shutting down bioscanners. There. Safe passage to the core lab. Cross turned back to the children. We're moving. Stay close. The corridor to the core lab stretched long and silent. Cross kept his steps light, senses sharp. Soren touched his wrist. They're scared, the boy whispered. Who? The bad people. They're afraid of you. Cross gave a grim smile. Good. The lab doors came into view. Thick, reinforced steel with Sector 7. Mindfire engraved above. Cross motioned for the children to stay back. He knelt beside the control panel. Next. I can crack it, but it'll alert security. Do it, Cross said. The panel beeped softly. The door slid open. Cross stepped through, pistol raise. The core lab was vast, circular, and cold. Dozens of monitors lined the walls, displaying brainwave patterns and energy signatures. In the center stood 2 containment pods, transparent with thick metal frames. Inside were Mia and Leela. Electrodes clung to their temples. Their eyes fluttered under closed lids. Cross's heart clenched. Mia, Leela. The girls didn't react. Across the room stood Commander Rail, flanked by 4 armored guards. Rail's thin lips twisted into a smile. Ah, Rail said softly. The father arrives, just in time to fail. Cross's eyes burned. Step away from my daughters. Rail clasped his hands behind his back. You misunderstand, Mr. Cross. They're not your daughters anymore. They're pioneers of the next stage of galactic evolution. Cross tightened his grip on his pistol. They're children, not tools. They were human children, Rail corrected. Now, thanks to Project Mindfire, they are so much more. Rail tapped a wrist controller. The pods hissed as energy surged into the electrodes. Maya and Layla's bodies arched in pain. Stop, Cross roared. He fired at the control panel on Rail's wrist. The bullet struck home, shattering the device. The energy streams cut off. The twins slumped, unconscious. Rail hissed in frustration. Kill him. The guards raised their weapons. Cross dove behind a console as plasma bolts scorched the floor. He fired back, taking 1 guard down with a headshot. Another advanced, firing in bursts. Cross shifted position and shot him in the knee. The guard fell, screaming. A 3rd guard charged. Cross emptied 2 rounds into his chest. The 4th moved wide to flank him. Suddenly, the guard stiffened and collapsed. Soren stood in the doorway, his eyes glowing. The guard's helmet cracked open from the inside. Cross nodded at the boy. Good work. Rail snarled and ran toward the pods. Cross aimed and fired. Click. Empty. Rail grabbed Mia, yanking her from the pod. The girl groaned, eyes half open. Stay back, Cross, Rail hissed, pressing a plasma blade against Mia's throat, or she dies. Cross froze. Mia whimpered softly. You're too soft, Rail sneered. You humans cling to your weak family bonds. That is why we control your kind. Love makes you weak. Cross's mind raced. His pistol was empty. His knife was on his belt, but Rail was too far for a throw. Think. Now. Mia, Cross said softly, locking eyes with his daughter. Do you remember our game? Her eyes fluttered. The ball, she whispered. Yes, sweetheart. The invisible ball. Remember how you catch it with your mind. Rail frowned. What are you? Cross mind tossing an invisible ball. Catch it, Mia. The girl's eyes cleared. Her small hand lifted slightly. The plasma blade shook. Rail cursed and tightened his grip, but the weapon ripped from his hand and flew across the room. Cross lunged. He slammed into Rail, knocking him to the ground. He drew his knife and drove it into Rail's chest. The alien gasped, eyes wide. Cross leaned close. You touched my daughters, he said softly. Now there's no escape. He twisted the knife. Rail shuddered and went still. Cross dropped the knife and turned to Mia, scooping her into his arms. Her small hands clung to him. Daddy, she whispered. I've got you, he said, voice breaking. He knelt beside Leela and cradled her too. Behind him, Soren stood guard, his silver eyes scanning the room. Next, Cross asked. Reinforcements inbound. We have maybe 4 minutes. Cross looked at the children gathered in the doorway. We take everyone. No one stays behind. He stood, his daughters in his arms, and walked toward the exit. The freed children followed, shadows moving with him through the red-lit corridor. The sacrifice for family. The red emergency lights painted the metal corridors in shades of blood as Captain Daniel Cross carried his daughters through Orion Station's labyrinth. Mia's head rested on his shoulder, her breathing weak but steady. Lila was unconscious, her body limp. Behind him, the alien boy Soren guided the other rescued children. Their frightened whispers echoed like ghostly murmurs. Cross's heart ached. The sight of his daughters, pale and fragile from the experiments, gnawed at him. He wanted to stop, to comfort them, but time was a luxury they didn't have. Nix, Cross said, voice tight. Status. Incoming hostiles. The AI responded. 2 squads moving toward us from the eastern corridor. They're blocking the path to the hangar. Alternative route. Maintenance tunnels. 2 levels down. But it'll be tight, especially with the kids. Mark it, Cross said. A glowing arrow appeared on his visor, guiding him. Cross adjusted his grip on his daughters. Soren, keep the kids close. The boy nodded, eyes wide but determined. I feel many bad people coming. Cross's jaw clenched. We'll get through. The group moved swiftly, feet padding over cold metal. The station creaked around them as security systems shifted into lockdown. Cross recognized the sounds. Turrets deploying, gas systems priming. The GEC wasn't just containing the breakout. They were preparing to erase all evidence of Project Mindfire, including the children. Next, can you disable the self-destruct? Already trying, the AI said. They used an offline control key. I'd need physical access to the command core. Cross swore under his breath. The command core was 4 levels above the hangar, enemy territory. We'll reach the ship first, he muttered. Then figure it out. They reached a junction where the corridors split into 3 paths. The maintenance tunnel hatch lay in the left passage. Cross knelt, setting Mia and Leela gently on the floor. He pried open the access panel and yanked the lever. The hatch groaned and slid open, revealing a narrow ladder descending into darkness. Kids go first, Cross ordered. Soren helped the others climb down. Cross lifted Mia into Soren's waiting arms, then passed Lila down. The younger children followed. Nix, give me a perimeter scan. Incoming? Right passage, Nix said. 10 hostiles, 30 meters and closing. Cross's heart pounded. Seal the hatch after me. Understood. As the last child disappeared down the ladder, Cross swung into the shaft and slid down the rails. His boots hit the ground just as Nick sealed the hatch above. "They'll cut through soon," Nick said. Cross turned to Soren. "Can you feel them?" The boy closed his eyes. "They're angry. Scared too. They want to catch us. Hurt us." "Not today," Cross said. The tunnel stretched toward the hangar access, dimly lit by flickering strips of old lighting. The air smelled of rust and coolant. As they moved, Cross's comm crackled. A cold, familiar voice came through. "Daniel Cross." Cross froze. His fingers tightened around his pistol. "Rail's dead," he said. "Who the hell is this?" "Commander Selleck, I've assumed control of Orion Station, and you've become quite the problem." Cross scanned the ceiling. The GEC loved hidden cameras. He spotted one and aimed his pistol. "You're too late," he said, firing. The camera shattered. "We don't need eyes to find you," Selleck said. "Surrender, and your daughters might live." Cross gritted his teeth. "You won't touch them again." "Asterisk we already have," Selleck said. "Mindfire isn't just a test. It's a seed, planted in your daughters' minds. Run all you want. The seed will grow, and when it blooms, we'll come for them." Cross's heart stopped. "You're lying. Check their neural signatures if you don't believe me." Tick-tock, Cross. "The clock's always ticking." The transmission ended. "Next," Cross said, voice shaking. "I detected elevated neural patterns in Mia and Leela," the AI said softly. "There's something implanted. I need more time to analyze it." Cross's fists shook. The GEC hadn't just kidnapped his daughters. They had turned their minds into time bombs. The tunnel ended at the hangar bay access door. Cross peered through the small window. His ship, the Iron Vow, sat 30 meters away. The loading ramp was down, engines on standby. But between them and the ship stood 10 GEC soldiers in heavy exosuits. Each one carried plasma rifles and gravity shield generators. "They're ready for us," Nick said. Cross's mind raced. He couldn't take them all in a firefight. And with the children behind him, running was impossible. "Options?" he asked. "There's a manual gravity control unit in the maintenance office to your right," Nick said. "If we overload it, we can create a localized gravity surge." Side effects. Everything in the bay, including the kids, would be slammed into the floor. Might cause injuries. Cross glanced back. Mia stirred in Soren's arms. Lila's eyes fluttered open. The other children clung to each other. Risk the surge or die in a firefight. "Nix," Cross said. "Overload the system on my mark." He met Soren's eyes. "Hold the kids down when I say. No matter what happens, you keep them low. Understand?" Soren nodded. Cross crouched near the maintenance office hatch. The guards stood alert, scanning the shadows. One gestured toward the tunnel entrance. "Now or never." "Mark," Cross shouted. He darted into the maintenance office as Nix activated the override. Alarms blared. The gravity surged. The hangar bay shuddered. The GEC guards collapsed under the pressure, metal suits grinding against the deck. The children screamed as they were pressed to the floor. Soren held Mia and Leela, his face contorted with effort. Cross staggered to the control console. The override lever was rusted, stuck in place. He slammed his boot against it. The lever snapped into position. The gravity field intensified. The guards groaned, pinned like insects. "Nix, open the ship's defense turrets," Cross ordered. "Done." Cross activated the turrets remotely. Twin cannons on the Iron Vow swiveled and fired. Plasma bolts tore into the immobilized guards, shattering armor and flesh. The smell of burning metal filled the air. "Gravity field off," Cross commanded. Nix deactivated the surge. Cross ran back to the children, lifting Mia and Leela. "Move. Get to the ship." The children scrambled toward the ramp. Soren guided them, his steps wobbly from exhaustion. Cross covered their retreat, firing at the few surviving guards who twitched on the ground. As they reached the ramp, the hangar's blast doors opened. Commander Salik stepped through, flanked by 4 armored elites. His pale eyes locked on Cross. "Nix, engines full burn," Cross yelled. The ship's engines roared to life, blasting Salik and his troops with waves of heat. Cross sprinted up the ramp as plasma bolts hissed past him. The ramp closed behind him with a metallic thud. "Launch," Cross roared. The iron vow lifted off, thrusters shaking the ship. Through the rear cameras, Cross saw Salik standing in the smoke, watching. Cross collapsed in the pilot's chair. His daughters lay on the floor beside him, breathing softly. The other children huddled in the cargo hold. "Nix," Cross said, voice hollow. "That seed in their minds. Can we remove it?" "I'm analyzing," she said. "But Cross, this technology is beyond anything we've seen." Cross closed his eyes. The war wasn't over. The enemy had planted something deep in his daughters' minds. The GEC wouldn't stop. He reached down and squeezed Mia's hand. Her fingers curled around his. "I promised I'd keep you safe," he whispered. "And I will." He turned his gaze toward the starlit void. Orion Station was destroyed, but the battle for his daughters had just begun. The iron vow unleashed. The heavy metal doors of the core lab hissed shut behind Captain Daniel Cross. His breathing was shallow, his arms aching as he carried his twin daughters. Mia's small hand clung to his jacket, her eyes half open. Lila's head rested on his shoulder, her body limp. The freed children followed closely, their faces pale and eyes wide. Soren, the silver-eyed boy, stayed near Cross, watching the corridor with sharp attention. "Nix," Cross whispered into his comm. "Status." The AI's voice crackled softly. "We've got problems. The GEC Dreadnought Revenant is moving into position. They're prepping their main weapon, plasma bombardment. If they fire, this station turns to slag." Cross's heart pounded. The GEC is burning the evidence. His daughters, these children. Collateral damage to protect their secrets. "Time," he asked. 4 minutes until firing sequence completes," Nix replied. "Also, they've scrambled hunter drones to intercept us if we escape." Cross clenched his jaw. "They want a war. We'll give them one." He shifted Mia and Lila slightly, their fragile bodies growing heavier by the second. They needed a medic, a safe place. Anything but the cold corridors of this death station. "Next, we need an exit. Service elevators ahead. One leads to the shuttle bay. Guide me." Cross moved down the corridor, footsteps silent despite the urgency in his veins. The children followed like shadows, whispering softly to one another in fear. The group reached the elevator shaft. Cross opened the panel. The button was dead. "Locked down," Nix said. "I can override it, but it'll alert every guard left." "Do it." The panel lit up. The elevator roared to life. The kids tensed as alarms blared through the corridor. "They know," Soren whispered. Cross raised his empty pistol like a club. The elevator doors slid open. "No one inside." "Get in," Cross ordered. The children hurried in. Cross stepped inside and hit the button for the shuttle bay. The doors began to close. Suddenly, plasma bolts streaked down the hall. Sparks exploded around the doorframe. 3 GEC troopers charged forward. Cross shoved Mia and Lila to Soren. "Protect them." He spun and charged out just before the doors closed, knife in hand. The guards hesitated, surprised by his attack. Cross threw the knife into the first guard's throat. The alien collapsed, gurgling. Cross ducked under a plasma shot and grabbed the fallen guard's carbine. He rolled into cover, fired 3 bursts, and dropped the second enemy. The last trooper roared and charged with an energy baton. Cross sidestepped and fired point-blank. The plasma bolt burned through the alien's chest. The body hit the floor with a dull thud. Cross didn't stop. He sprinted to the elevator shaft's maintenance ladder and climbed. His muscles screamed in protest. His mind focused on one goal, reaching the shuttle bay. The elevator reached the top. The children spilled out into a dimly lit hangar. Small maintenance ships lined the walls, but Cross knew none of them could survive the Revenant's firepower. The iron vow hovered just beyond the magnetic shield, cloaked in shimmering invisibility. Nix, to cloak. Open the ramp. The stealth field dropped. The ship's sleek, gray form materialized with a hum. The rear ramp lowered. Go, Cross shouted. Get aboard. Soren led the group up the ramp. Cross stumbled in last, collapsing onto the floor, his daughters still cradled in his arms. The ramp sealed. The engines roared to life. Nix, lift off. The ship shot forward, escaping through the force field just as plasma cannons fired from the bay walls. The bolts missed by meters. Cross laid his daughters gently on a medical cot. Mia's eyes fluttered open. Daddy. I'm here, baby, Cross said, voice breaking. I've got you, I promise. Leela stirred, whispering softly. Hot. My head feels hot. Nix, scan them. A holographic medical readout appeared above the cot. Their neural pathways were overstimulated, Nix said. The GEC tried to force their abilities to grow too fast. If they stay like this. They won't, Cross interrupted. Put them into stasis. That will slow the damage but won't heal it. Do it, Cross said, throat tight. The cot hummed softly. A blue mist cooled the air as the girls' breathing steadied. Cross touched Mia's forehead, then Layla's. Their skin turned cool under the stasis field. His rage boiled beneath the surface. The GEC did this. Rail did this. But Rail was only the start. Nix, Cross said, standing. What's the dreadnought's status? Targeting lock in 30 seconds. Cross staggered toward the cockpit. His legs trembled from exhaustion, but he forced himself to move. He dropped into the pilot's chair. The Revenant loomed on the display, a massive black spearhead above the planet. What weapons do we have? Rail cannons and missile pods, Nix said. But against that dreadnought, it's like throwing stones at a mountain. Cross's mind raced. He stared at the dreadnought's design, then focused on a faint heat signature, the plasma core's exhaust vents. Nix, what happens if we fire a gravity pulse into the core vent? That close. The core will destabilize. The dreadnought would explode. And us. Depends on how fast we move, Nix said. Best case, we escape by half a second. Cross cracked his neck. Sounds like a good plan. The iron vow rocketed toward the dreadnought. Enemy fighters swarmed toward them. Cross jinked left, then rolled the ship hard. Plasma bolts crackled past the hull. The gravity pulse cannon charged, the low hum filling the cabin. Target the core vent, Cross ordered. Locked, Nix confirmed, but they're trying to jam the firing sequence. Cross growled. Override manually. He yanked open the control panel and rerouted the power flow. Sparks burned his fingers, but the targeting reticle turned green. Gravity cannon ready, Nix said. The dreadnought's main cannon glowed like a miniature sun. Targeting locks screamed on Cross's console. Cross gripped the trigger. Fire. The cannon discharged with a deep, resonant thrum. The pulse shot toward the dreadnought's vent like a silver comet. Now move, Cross shouted. The iron vow dove. Fighters pursued, plasma fire raining around them. The dreadnought's cannon flared, then sputtered. The plasma vent imploded. The ship convulsed as the core overloaded. A massive explosion burst from the dreadnought's center, ripping through its hull. The shockwave expanded outward. Brace, Nix shouted. The wave hit the iron vow. The ship spun violently. Cross slammed into the controls. Alarms blared. The ship tumbled through space. Finally, the shaking stopped. Cross opened his eyes. Through the viewport, the dreadnought was gone. Only debris remained. The children cheered faintly from the back of the cabin. Cross sagged in his chair. His daughters lay safe in the stasis field. The GEC's flagship was destroyed. Nix, send the recording of Rail's experiments to every network in the galaxy. Sending now. Cross exhaled. The war wasn't over. But the galaxy now knew the truth, and Daniel Cross would make sure no one touched his daughters again. The reckoning of Oran. The stars burned cold and distant through the cracked viewport of the Iron Vow. Captain Daniel Cross sat slumped in the pilot's chair, blood crusted on his temple, muscles numb from exhaustion. The destroyed dreadnought Revenant was now just a brace, slowly drifting across the planet's orbit. But victory came with a price. His daughters lay in the stasis chamber behind him, their minds fragile from the GEC's cruel experiments. Nix, Cross said, voice raw. Status report. Shields at 20%. Engines unstable. Gravity cannon offline. But we're alive, the AI answered. For now. Cross turned his head toward the back of the cabin. Soren sat on the floor, comforting the younger children. The boy's silver eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. The alien child looked up. They're coming, he said softly. Cross stiffened. Who's coming? Soren's eyes closed. Bad minds. Angry. They're coming fast. The cockpit scanner beeped in agreement. 3 new dreadnought signatures appeared on the display. The GEC wasn't retreating. They were escalating. Nix, identify. 3 dreadnoughts. Judicator, Nemesis, and Dominion. All full combat class. Cross felt his heart sink. 1 dreadnought nearly killed them. 3 would turn them to ash. Incoming transmission, Nix added. Patch it through. The holoscreen flickered to life. A tall alien appeared, with skin like molten stone and eyes like twin suns. Cross recognized him. Grand Marshal Threxus, the commander of GEC forces in this sector. Daniel Cross. Threxus rumbled. Surrender now. You are guilty of attacking a lawful galactic enforcement station. Hand over the psychic children, and I may let you live. Cross leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Your people took my daughters, tortured them, experimented on innocent kids. He pointed at the wreckage of the destroyed dreadnought. That's your law, and I just broke it. Threxus's molten eyes narrowed. You have no allies, no escape. You're human, fragile, temporary. The galaxy obeys us because we are strong. You cannot win. Cross's lip curled into a grim smile. Strength. You think strength comes from fear. Real strength comes from family, from the bonds you can't break. Brave words, Threxus sneered. But your story ends here. The transmission cut out. The dreadnoughts advanced. Nix, Cross said, standing. Activate emergency beacon. There's no one left to call, Nix said. Earth's fleets are days away. We're not calling Earth. Then who? All of them. Cross's eyes blazed. Broadcast Rail's confession across every pirate, mercenary, and resistance channel. Let the galaxy see what the GEC does to children. Nix hesitated. You're playing with fire here, Cross. Good, he said. Now, open a wideband comm. Connected. Cross stood, staring into the holocamera. His face was bruised, bloodied, and unyielding. This is Daniel Cross, he said, voice calm and cold. The GEC calls itself the law, but the law doesn't steal children. The law doesn't torture innocents. The law doesn't destroy entire colonies to hide its crimes. He leaned forward. I know many of you live under their shadow. Some of you lost your kids, your families. I'm done running. I'm making a stand here now. Orion Station is the heart of their experiments. If you want justice, real justice, come and fight. He cut the feed. Message sent, Nix confirmed. Good, Cross said. Now let's make sure we survive until help arrives. The dreadnoughts opened fire. Plasma beams sliced through space like molten whips. The Iron Vow weaved and twisted, but the battered engines struggled. The shield sparked with each impact. Nix, give me manual control. Manual? In this condition. Trust me. Cross gripped the controls. His hand shook from fatigue, but instinct took over. The ship rolled through the plasma fire, diving toward Orion Station's surface. The dreadnoughts followed. What's the plan here, Cross? Nix asked. Because so far, this looks like suicide. We lure them close to the station, Cross said. The GEC always protects its lives. If we hit the core, we take everything with us. Blow up the station. Exactly. They want mind fire tech intact. If we destroy it, they lose. The Iron Vow dove into the planet's thin atmosphere. The dreadnoughts followed, unleashing guided plasma missiles. Nix, deploy decoys. Decoys away. Small pods ejected from the ship, releasing clouds of electromagnetic interference. The missiles veered off course, exploding harmlessly. The station's massive dome loomed below. Cross angled the ship toward the main power core, visible as a glowing tower at the surface's center. Inside the cockpit, Soren suddenly gasped. His eyes rolled back. Cross knelt beside him. Soren. The boy's body shook. His voice came out hollow, distant. Dark mind. Coming. Hungry. Cross's skin prickled. Nix. I'm detecting a strange energy signature from Judicator, she said. It's different, like neural waves. Cross's mind raced. The GEC made mindfire to control psychic minds. If they figured out how to amplify it, Soren and his daughters would become weapons. Target Judicator's bridge, Cross said. Rail cannons can't pierce dreadnought armor, Nix said. They don't have to, Cross replied. Just aim for their comms array. We'll cut their control signal. The rail cannons fired. Steel slugs shot through the sky. The comms array on Judicator shattered. Soren gasped. His shaking stopped. The dark mind. It's gone. Good, Cross said. Now let's finish this. Cross targeted Orion Station's power core. He armed the last gravity charge. Nix, give me a blast radius calculation. That close. We'll need a miracle to survive. Cross glanced at the stasis chamber. His daughters lay peacefully, unaware of the battle raging around them. Then let's make a miracle. The gravity pulse fired directly into the power core. The ground trembled. The core's energy spiked, rising beyond critical. A deep bass hum filled the air. The dreadnoughts realized too late what was happening. They fired frantically, but the Iron Vow was already climbing. Brace! Nix shouted. The core detonated. A shockwave of blue-white energy erupted from Orion Station, tearing through the atmosphere. The dreadnoughts, caught too close, were engulfed. Their shields failed instantly. Metal hulls twisted and shattered. The Judicator, Nemesis, and Dominion disintegrated. The Iron Vow was tossed like a leaf in a storm. Cross fought the controls as the ship tumbled through the atmosphere. Smoke filled the cabin. The children screamed. Nix, emergency stabilization. Working on it. The engines flared back to life. The ship leveled out, skimming just above the planet's surface. Cross steered toward a rocky plateau and set the ship down with a bone-jarring crash. Silence followed. Cross unstrapped himself and staggered to the stasis pod. Maya and Leela still breathed. Soren sat beside them, exhausted but conscious. Outside, faint lights appeared in the sky. Ships, many ships, descended through the ash-filled clouds. Freighters, pirate corvettes, mercenary fighters. His call had been answered. Nix's voice broke the silence. Incoming transmission. Put it through. A rough voice spoke. This is Captain Reyes of the Free Systems Alliance. We saw your broadcast. The galaxy knows now. The GEC's finished. Cross sagged in relief. He looked at his daughters, then at Soren. The fight's not over, Cross said softly. But it just changed. Mia's eyes fluttered open. Daddy? He smiled through his tears. I'm here, baby. I always will be.